We do have some molds. We have the acorn mold as well as oak leaf mold. And if you want to do those, you can feel free to do those as well. I just want to make different shapes and sizes. We really wanted one here and one here. And this guy, I may have got over a little bit too much here. So I'm going to start my next one to see if I have or not. And if we need to move him a little bit before he dries much more. Don't be afraid to take them off and start over. I will tell you, if your QuikWood is starting to harden, throw it away and pick a new one. You don't want to put one on and that not stick. If you ever have any problems with anything falling off, which you shouldn't, as long as it was wet enough and you didn't have too much oil on the bottom of it, just use some E6000 to glue them back on. It is not that big of a deal at all. So don't, especially if you don't like one, make sure you take it off and just redo it. Just have fun with it. It's not supposed to be real stressful. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's not supposed to look like mine. I can't tell you how many students just think that everything has to look just like the teachers, and that is one of the biggest no-nos as a student I can tell you about. So let's get this guy rolled out. And I may need a little bit more, we'll see here. And I like to work with whatever shape has almost come out of the roller a lot of times, just by trimming it just a little and getting those in. And again, we're going to work on our edges. And if you would be more comfortable to work with it a little bit more while it's on here, like your leaf part, do it down here. If that's easier for you to do, and then transfer it, let's do it that way. So let's work on that. So we're gonna do this one mostly on our paper, our wax paper, before we transfer it here. It would be definitely easier to do your middle work that way, all the way down, and put our lines in. And you will find that one way is going to work better for you than another way, and it may be something a little bit different that I haven't even thought of. Now, because we've got our wax paper, we've got our spray on it, we should be able to lift this up really easily. And then just bring it over to our gourd. And I want to move this piece over a little bit. And so I played with him a little bit. Okay, so I've got that guy coming around. I'm going to leave this one up in the air. And I'm going to get these back in here again. And I'm going to pick that up a little, and maybe this guy. So we've got it cornered around by all of those. So I'm going to continue working around now, and I'll probably do a small one and a larger one, a small one and a larger one across the back, and I will leave some extra things for acorns as I go along. And then we're going to put some kind of fill-in ones that are up on top as we're working. So whatever method works better for you, whether you like to put it on down first and then put it onto your gourd, do all of the work first and then just touch it up on the gourd, or if you would rather do it on the gourd, add all the details, that's really going to be a personal thing. And you want some of these touching, you can have them spread apart, whatever you decide that you like. Don't make the way I do it how you think it should be. Use your own ideas and how you envision it in your head. So there's a lot of things to think about. So I want this one to be a little bit smaller one here. So this is going to go on between. And they can be fatter too if you think this one should be fatter. I want this to be my top. And make sure again that you've done that clay really well. Otherwise, if you get a part that hasn't hardened up, you did not mix it well enough. And you would have to take it off and start over. So that's real important that those are mixed well enough. So I'm going to come in here with just my water. I'm going to do my edges. Get rid of that guy right there. And start those guys. We'll do those again when he gets on the gourd so we get his shape. If you can get those, instead of rolling it, if you have a light enough touch, you can do those by just sliding them just a little bit. But if you don't, go back to the rolling. And put that middle line down. And one more right there. Do that guy right about there. And you can leave these flat if you feel these should be flat, or you can pick them up a little bit to give them more of a movement. That's going to be totally up to you. These are going to be more on the back side, or whatever you kind of feel you should do. So I'm going to do one more long one here. And I think personally I like to work on them on the wax paper. But I know people have, like I said, some way works better for others. And if I can find the edge of this plastic. Okay, we'll get it someday. There it is. Okay. And again, this really isn't a big enough one to do an acorn, but I've got to get some acorn drying here. make sure when you're lifting an edge that you're not doing it on the same place on every leaf, that you're doing it in different places so it's not the same, it doesn't look the same. A pretty small for an acorn. I tried to go with this shape a little bit, but I may have too much of a thing. We'll see here, but nature is not perfect. That's real important to remember. It's usually at odd numbers, not even numbers. So again, you need to roll this, roll it. You can lightly slide it and not catch it. Go ahead and do that. And again, down that middle part. I don't know if you guys can hear the crickets tonight or not. They are singing tonight. So this is a real different looking leaf. That's what we want. We want some different variations of our leaves. Put this guy right up next to that one. And again, the first thing I'm going to do is add those guys back in. Okay. So I'm going to continue working around this now and adding leaves as I go. I'm also going to take any of my bigger pieces of QuikWood left and add or make a little pine cone, or excuse me, acorn. So we do want quite a few of those, and if you even just want to stop and make those and get those drying as well, that is up to you. I went ahead and have done all the way around. I lifted some up, but I didn't lift them up too much because we want to come in with that second layer, but you're not going to put a second layer on until we paint the first layer. Otherwise it gets really, really hard. But you don't have to do that. That I did use one full QuikWood for the bottom. But this is a real simple design. I've got three, a tiny one here and two on each side and three up on top. So that is really, really simple. So you can do it just that way, and that's not very much QuikWood at all. And then it just really frames your design. So whatever you think is more simple. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with my ones going the opposite direction. So these are obviously going to be smaller this time around. And I'm not going to overlap these as much as I did the other ones. And they're going to be spaced out a little bit. But on the first one, on this one, I did a lot of movement on this leaf, and I really like that. So I think that's what I'm going to try to do on my first one here. So let me get it all kneaded. Another thing you could do is you can Mod Podge the inside so it would be a different color. And it goes with your piece. You could do it fall colors. I usually try to do it a background color though, so it doesn't take away from the rest of the design, but that's a personal preference. Whatever you like. And to do all the acorns around the front and around, if you want to do, I think I need at least 12. On this smaller one, I did 3. If I did it again, I might do 4 or 5. So again, that's kind of a personal preference to you. Whatever you think you need. And I'm doing them a little bit thicker so they're just not flat, kind of lifeless leaves, and they're actually easier to paint when you do them a little bit thicker as well. So I'm going to get this guy here, and I'm going to make him a little bit bigger than I'm going to make the rest of them because I'm going to kind of move him a little bit more. So that be the reason. And what I just did is I dipped my knife in the water, and it helped keep that cleaner as I'm cutting. So that may be a nice thing to do. I'm going to try the same here with pulling this down, and that worked really well. You don't want it really wet that it's dripping though, because you don't want that water sitting on your clay. That's my dog. If you hear that moan in the background, either that or it's dinner time. I'm not sure which. So, okay, so I'm going to take this guy now, and I'm going to put him, and I want him kind of, I'm going to pull him out just a little bit more here. He's thicker than I thought he was. There, I like that. Smooth, just so I've got this sticking up, and the longer this dries, if you want to bending it at the end, it'll stay in place when it starts to dry. So kind of think about that. So we're going to come in here now and try to carefully use these guys to get these edges in here. And I'm going to come back and set him back there in just a second. But I want to get these in here. So I want to kind of have that guy. So we have that movement, and I probably should have got him a little thinner. I didn't realize he was as thick as he was. So now I'm going to come back and do this guy smaller for sure. And I'm going to do my next one here, kind of pulling off from that one. When you're putting them up like that, you've got to think about painting the underneath. So either have a lot or just a little bit so that you can get underneath to paint them. So it's something to think about as you're working on them. This guy's not quite there yet. And if you're rolling this and it sticks, take your vegetable oil and lay that on top. You really don't want it underneath too much because you want that to stick to your gourd really well. should have tried that water trick there. Okay, and lift it up, get those edges a little bit smoother here. Okay, now this one is going to come out of there. I think I'm gonna not quite put him as flat either, and I'm gonna do the acorns in there. I'm gonna either do 2 or 3 there to fill that hole in, because this is such a wide area there. And again, with those tools to bring that in, I think that just really is what makes those look like oak leaves. So, okay, so now I'm gonna kind of come and probably do 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 of those all the way around. This has got a smaller neck, and I still did, I think, 6 or 7. 2, 4, 6, 7. I still did 7 on this one, and I kept these pretty flat except for those first couple, but that's just a personal opinion. That's up to you. They're harder to paint if they're not flat. I will keep reminding you that. So I'm just going to go ahead and just do those small ones. And I try not to take them all the way to the top. I try to keep them in that painted area that we did. And then also I'm going to come back and show you kind of what the leaves would look like if, and the acorns, if we use the mold. And to use a mold, you simply can spray it in there, or you can spray it in your finger. Same thing with these. You want to really make sure these guys, you get the edges up in there as well, because they're so different when you're working with those. And you try to think about how much you need for each individual piece. And you can put these directly onto the leaves, directly onto the gourd itself. I just kind of wanted to give you some other options in case you get frustrated. And the acorns, I think the half would be enough, but I think if you put the 2 halves together, you can make a really cool hole. And what I would do is, by starting with this one first, letting that dry, and then doing the second one and setting that on top while that one's wet, is what I would do. So when you're working with these molds, what I do is I take the amount that I think it's going to do to fill them up, kind of put it in a ball, and push it. Now anything extra, slide off with your finger. I had that one pretty close. Sometimes if you use your thumb, and just everything you want to keep inside. You don't want any of that hanging on the outside. So there is an acorn. Now I want to do a leaf to show you a leaf. These aren't really thick, so it doesn't take as much as I probably think it should take. And I kind of want to show you how to lay one down here. I think I'll put on the bottom one of these other gourds so you can see how you can simply lay them on straight out of the mold, because otherwise they're going to be flat and you're not going to be able to shape them to the mold like we're doing here. But the advantage to doing them by hand is you're not going to have 2 alike, and these you will have 2. They will all be alike. So I'm just going to push this in here and start working this down. This is a little bit more complicated mold because it's got all of these areas. So I'm trying to slide off the extra without taking it out of the mold. And you want to push it all towards the middle. Now, I take and wipe off all the oil so that'll stick to my gourd. This works great on gourd pieces or flat pieces. And then I just simply take it to where I'm going to put it onto my gourd and start to press really, really hard. Don't wiggle it. And just lay that there. And this one's at such an angle, it's going to give me a little bit tougher time. And just, once you know it's sticking, walk that off. Now, these were a little bit over on the edges. And so you just simply come in with your hobby knife and remove those. But doesn't that really make a really nice leaf? So you do have an option of doing it like that. And then you could pick it up and move it around a little bit if you wanted to as well. So that is how you would use the molds. And so just to kind of give you other ideas on what you can do with that. Now I wanted to kind of take a look at our acorn, and you can put these on your wax paper and punch them out, and there's nothing wrong with that. So see, you can lay that down. I pushed him a little bit too much in the middle for his shape, but that is what the acorn is going to look like. I'm going to go ahead and let one dry and try putting them together to show you a little bit later. We've gone ahead and done all of the leaves all of the way around. So we have them going up and down completely around. And I have some lifted and some not quite as lifted. And don't forget, we're going to do the second row, but we've got to start base coating it first. I did do a acorn with the two halves, and that's kind of how it turns out. You do see the line. So I do like mine, I think, a little bit better, but if you were only doing half of one, that's a nice option to have. I've done about 12 or a dozen of the little acorn inside, so I've got those all nice and hard and drying up. So we're going to go ahead and paint our leaves now, base coat our leaves to start with. And what we're going to do is we're going to base coat in 3 different colors. We're going to highlight with different colors, but in these we're going to base coat with these colors. And I try to not give people an exact color because I want them to kind of use what you have. I want to give you a general idea. These are acrylic colors. It does not matter which brand. It depends on what you like. The little bit more expensive ones go on a little bit nicer and are a little bit thicker, and your thinner ones you may just have to buy or just do another coat or so. So that's totally up to you. But I'm going to use like a spring green or lime green. I'm going to use like a straw or an imperial kind of gold yellow, and then a pumpkin. So any of those are just fine. Before we base coat those, I'm going to take my alcohol, my rubbing alcohol, and I am just going to put it on my cotton round, and I'm going to just clean off my clay. And what we're doing is removing our oil. You don't want to rub it onto your gourd. You just want to do it on top of the leaves. And this is going to help your paint go on just a little bit better so that there is no oil residues. So go ahead and get that done, and then we're going to start base coating. Use whatever brush you're comfortable with. You can use a flat, you can use an angle, you can use smaller, you can use bigger. Use what you have. And we're just going to, I wet my brush but dried it off just to get that in my brush and get it kind of uncrispy. And then we're just going to base coat each leaf as we go along. It does not matter what order they are done. You kind of want to mix them up and do them here and there. And you'll probably need at least 2 coats. We'll leave that up to you. If you do one because we're going to do a lot over the top of it and you don't want to do any more, then that is fine too. But one thing I would suggest while you're working on these is turn it to the side. You may want to get a smaller brush to get into these little things, and this is the part I don't like. As an artist, if I could forget this part, that's the part I'd like to forget. And then we're going to get all those little sides. Get your Q-tips and clean it off if you get it on your gourd. And then also these little areas where it's lifted up, you've got to get underneath those. Anything that shows has got to match the color of the leaf. So I'm just going to continue going around here. So like this one here, I've got to make sure that I do this side the same color or here. So I'm just going to continue working that all the way around. I'm getting each one of those and get that base coating all done. I've painted all of my yellow leaves, and I wanted to kind of tell you a couple of things. I painted the leaf first, and then I painted the edges, and then I came back and did one more coat and just really smooth that out, and that worked really well. Another thing is if you get a little bit of paint just on the side sometimes where you don't quite want, and we're going to come back over with some brown, so don't worry about it too much, but you could also come in with a clean wet brush while it's still damp and just lift that up and kind of erase that. So that's kind of helps you clean it out. But you can see I'm not doing it perfect. This is not perfect. You can do it as perfect as you want, but I am not doing really perfect. Nature isn't going to be real perfect, and I'm going to put a lot over it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back and finish the rest of them. I've got all my leaves base coated, and don't let it freak you out, all the bright colors. But remember, fall is about bright and vibrant, rich colors, not about pastels or anything like that. So if you needed to add another color to these, you could add a light brown if you think you needed one more. But don't do red. We want to make sure that we stay away from red because our base is red. We are going to use some of it to color our leaves, but we have so much that we're going to do to our leaves that really gives it the detail. So don't worry about it. But what we've got to do is we're going to float color around the outside of our leaves, and this is what makes our leaves stand out and gives them a shadow. Otherwise they feel like they're one piece and you don't really see them. They kind of fade into the background or into the gourd. So that is what we're going to do. Now if you've never floated before, we're going to give you a little bit of a lesson here. And those of you know how to and have floated with water, that's fine. Go ahead and do it that way. Those of you who have not, I'm going to use Color Float, and it's for easy shading or highlighting. And sometimes you hear that word. They'll call it shading or highlighting, and that just depends on whether you're going lighter or darker. But it's also called floating. And I use a 1/2 inch, and I want a 1/2 inch at the least right now, but you can use a flat. You don't have to use an angle. I was taught with an angle, and I've taught with an angle. It's just easier for me. So that is up to you. Now make sure your water is clean. This is my palette paper, and if you don't have palette paper, you could use clean wax paper, or I even a lot of times will use it on my just plastic plate, but you have to keep it clean as you're going. You can't go over the same spot, so that's kind of important. But I wouldn't do anything smaller than a 1/2 inch brush. Now if you're used to doing it with the water, then go ahead and do it with the water. But if you've never done it before, I'm going to take my Color Float, and I'm just going to lay my brush into it and just kind of work that in just a little bit, and you're going to dip it into your paint. So we've got at least half, if not more, of our paint through that brush. And what floating is taking it and going from one solid color to another, and we blend it back and forth until we have gone from one solid color to no color. And it's real important to blend it out. And each and every time you're done, you need to do it again. We can get a little bit, if we're using the color float, you can walk into it just a little bit more than if you were doing just water. If you're doing just water, make sure you rinse and reload each and every time. So what we're going to do now is, I'm going to try and pick one that's kind of easier to do. We're going to go color up against our leaf. And I'm reloading here. Color up against our leaf, and we're going to float and shade where it is touching the gourd. And in some areas you're not going to be able to get in there as much, and you can see I've still got that color float in there, so I'm just working that. But some areas you're not going to be able to get, like right in here. We'll just add some brown in there. So like this guy here, I'm going to go all the way around, and anything that you've, like that little green spot right there, we're just going to cover over with our brown so that it doesn't show up. But you see how it's not showing up as well, but you can see now that the leaves are starting to move forward. So that is, I'm going to put a little bit more float back in there. But as long as your color is going from all to nothing, you are fine. And we're going to keep working our way around all of our leaves. Never go back over an area that you've done. Wait for it to dry and then go back, because you just lift up the paint. And like on this part where you fall off, and then just pick up the areas that you can. So we're going to go around, and we want to do every single one of these, even these ones up here on the top. We're going to go around each and every one of those. So I am going to continue, and when it starts, if it starts to get solid color all the way through, rinse it, put your color float back in, and start again. I'm going to go all the way around these that I can, and then I'm going to come in and we're just going to put a little bit of brown in between the spots that we couldn't float into. And just get that done. What I did is I did these kind of all this way, and where these were tied together, when I flipped it up here, I started here and did this side and then did this side and kept going. Now some of these are a little bit smaller and you're not going to be able to get your brush in there, so we're going to just wet our paint down just a bit. We don't want it one solid color, just a little bit of water added to it. Not too much, but just enough. And then we're going to go in those areas that we couldn't get into. And this is a darker color base, so it doesn't show up as much. But if you had a lighter color base, then you would really need to see that. So any of those areas that you couldn't get your brush into, to darken those up, just take your little liner and just kind of base coat that in there. It's not so much a base coat, it's just darkening it up. So all the way around where you've needed to do that. So go ahead and finish that up, and then we're going to start adding some darker. Oh, and by the way, I think I forgot to mention that the color that I'm using to do the shading is the burnt umber, or the floating is the burnt umber, the darkest of the browns before the blacks. And that way, if you've done it right, it just looks like a nice shadow behind the leaves. We're going to be using our burnt umber still, and I'm using a round, this is a 3, and what I'm doing now is all of these areas that have the in where we pushed it in with our wax tool, and you could water it down just a little bit if you wanted, but not much. You want it pretty well based coat, but all those little areas where we kind of put that little round circle in, we want to kind of darken those up. And if you think that should be a little bit lighter, then make it a little bit lighter. But we're going to just kind of come in, and if you want to do some on the edges as well, you can do a little bit on the edges. But we want to give those a shadow. And there is no perfect way, however you want to do it. If you ever look at leaves, they're always real crispy. They're not smooth. They're not perfect. So think about that. And if you want to do any on the edge a little bit, you can do a little bit on the edge as well. And we're going to come over and highlight it with other colors. So we've got a lot to do. This is just our base color, so don't worry about it looking absolutely perfect. We're just going to kind of darken those in and get some shading where there should be some shading in those deep areas. So get that done, and then we'll go to the next step. We've got that all done. Doesn't need to look nice and neat. We're going to float our color one more time, and if you think the burnt umber is too dark for this, you could go to a medium brown. But what I'm going to do is really walk this color out so we don't have a lot of color in it. And what we want to do is wherever a leaf is under another leaf, we're going to shade around that on the bottom one, because there would be a shadow there. Now I know we're going to have some acorns and different stuff over the top of this still, but if it shows up, you want that shadow in there. So anywhere underneath a leaf, or if one's touching, you can kind of divide it. And I think I have another one right here. So this one is on top of that one, and that one, and that one. So we're going to put those shadows in on any area like that. So go ahead and get that done up, and we're going to start adding some color to our leaves. We're going to bring in some more colors, plus we're going to use the ones that we were already using. I'm going to bring in a purple, a darker green like a Christmas green, and then like a medium brown. And we're going to start shading all of these different leaves with all kinds of fun colors. I'm also going to bring in red. So any of these colors you can use on a leaf. And so it kind of depends on what you think the leaf needs, or what colors you kind of think it needs. Like the green, you may want to bring in the dark purple, the purple, the dark green, and a brown. It just really varies, and just play with it, what you like, what you don't like. And there is no right or wrong on that. That'll be the one thing that I will say. There is no right or wrong here. Find my right brush in a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and start floating again. And however you decide, if you're using the color float, or if you're going to use the water, that is up to you. And I do have a good video that goes into a little bit more detail on the float. We'll try to post that on this video for you as well, so you have that information. It's just a YouTube that you can watch. So on this one, like these guys right here, I want to go along these edges, and you can kind of walk this color up a little bit. And I forgot to put brown on him for some reason, so I'll have to go back and put brown on him. And so on this bottom part, I want to put some orange and probably some brown as well. So I think I'm actually going to put the orange or pumpkin, whatever color you decide. The color should not be going all the way through. Should be darker along the edges, and I probably have that just a little bit too much water there. And I'm going to walk that forward. That means I'm just moving my brush with that color kind of upward. And so I am going to put a little bit of medium brown around the bottom areas. And I want this color about 3/4 of the way through my brush on this one. I want it quite a bit because we want a lot of that. Now you can walk back into that color a little bit, and so that the color kind of fades into the other color. And there is no right or wrong on this. Like I said, there is just all kinds of fun things. If you kind of found this aggravating and didn't really like doing this, another thing you could do is just take a sea sponge and sponge that little bit of color in as well. So on this green one now, I'm going to do purple and dark green for sure. And my dark green here. I really want to make sure on this piece, I think the stone I'm using is the purple, so I want to make sure that I have lots of purple in this piece. So that's something to think about too, if you're going to use a stone or if you're not going to use a stone. If you are, then bring out that color. I'm just clearing color off that edge if it walked through too far. So this one now, I'm going to bring that purple up along that outside edge. And we've got that. And like I said, doesn't have to be perfect. We still got a lot we're going to do to this. Now I want to show you, see if I go back over this and I'm not walking forward, it starts to pick up the color. So if you wanted that wider or thicker, leave that, let that dry for a minute, and then go back and do it again. So on this other area here, I might leave that part lighter there, and I might bring the dark green right down in there, and I think I like that one just the way he is. So on my next orange one, I am going to do some red, and there is no right or wrong where you think it should go on here. I think I'm going to do this more towards the bottom and walk it up just a little bit. And if you want to bring that over the edge, if you think it needs it over the edge, and bring it over that edge a little bit too. And a lot of times if you have a spot that you didn't get color on before and you kind of want to walk that up a bit, walk that up a bit. But it's just playing with it, deciding what you think your leaves should look like. And remember, I am just giving you an example. Do your own thing with it. I can't encourage that enough. Yours does not have to look like mine. Take your idea and run with it. So if we walk that color up a little bit now, because that yellow is going to fade a little bit. It's going to go down in there a little bit. It's not going to be quite as bright. You also can use the burnt umber if you want a little bit darker brown instead of the medium brown. And I'm just going to start that color up there and move that down a little bit. And there. And it really is just playing with it until you get it. Don't be afraid to go back like this screen right here. That to me is a little bit thin, and I don't quite have it the way I want it yet. So I'm going to go back over it a little bit more. Okay, but we're just going to go ahead and just keep working those, whatever colors you want. Don't be afraid to mix and match. Don't do them the same. Switch your colors around. Put the red on the green and the purple on the yellow. Just really play and make those nice and bright. Another thing we want to talk about is don't be afraid to take a color and go over another color to make it a little bit of a highlight. Here we have the red, and if we came in just put just a little bit of purple just right there, that really sets that off. So don't be afraid to do something like that. But I also wanted to show you what I meant about the sponging. If you were having a hard time with the floats, this is a natural sea sponge, and you only want to use a little bit of it, and I wet it down and you completely rinse it out. And I'm going to go into my paint, but you don't actually go directly into your paint. You pull it out to the side and pounce in it, and that keeps it from getting really covered with paint and just have a blob. And then what you can do is just take it on the outsides where you want to go with that and just pounce that color on. And we're going to be using a little bit more of that technique a little bit later as well. So but if you were having a hard time and you wanted to do something different, that also gives you another option to the float. Now that you've floated all of your color, and you may find it easier while you're floating the color just to bring it around those edges a little bit, but I didn't. So what I do is I'm just going to take my round brush, or if you need a liner brush, and I'm just going to add a little bit of water to my paint. I gotta get some fresh air, it's drying out. I only put a tiny drop of these on when I'm doing these, because you don't need a lot of paint at all, because there's so many variables. And then I'm just gonna, once you watered it down just a little bit, not much water, you're just gonna bring that over a little bit on the edges where those colors came. And if it's too watery, go back and pick it up a little bit. And it doesn't have to be a bunch. You just don't want those stark edges everywhere. So that's all that we're doing. Like right here I have a little bit of orange, and if it needs the brown instead, then do the brown. Here I have a little bit of darker green, so I'm going to do just a little bit of darker green there. So we're just undoing those really stark edges, and that is all we're going to do just to get those to not stand out. And we're getting our leaves going. There's not too much more we have left to do. We get to do some fun things. So go ahead and finish that up all the way around. You can continue to play with it and play with it and play with it. But one thing I will say is don't try to overdo it. Don't try to make it perfect. Get up and walk away from it. Look at it after 5 minutes or so, and then if you want to touch anything else up, you can from there. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take our gold metallic, and this is a metallic paint. Whatever brand you want is fine. And we're going to sponge our leaves. I'm going to open it up from the middle here. Our hole is plugged. So I'm going to use that little sea sponge that I showed you a little bit earlier. I have put it in water and completely wrung it out so it is just damp. There is no water running out of it. We're going to do the same thing again here. And I've got way too much paint, I can already tell you that. Pull it out, pounce on top. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sponge all of our leaves, and this is going to kind of help set that color down and also give it a natural color. We don't really want this on the edges, so you can use a clean edge to pick up anything that may have got there, or use a clean paintbrush and just wipe those areas off. And you should only need to load maybe once or twice, but you can see how that sets that leaf down, those colors. It makes those colors not quite as bright. And here we'll show a little bit more on the green and purple one, but we're just going to go all the way around all of the leaves, up and down. And like I said, if you get any that you need to remove, if you don't mind it there, leave it. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want that off, just take that off with a damp paintbrush. So go ahead and put that all on. We have one more step on our leaves before we had a few more leaves. So lots of fun. Try not to get, if you get a part like that, just take your dry in and get it off. But that's what we were talking about. If you put it directly in the paint and it picks up too much, that's why it's so important to pull it out and stick it in there. But that just kind of then all starts to make these settle down. You can see how this helped kind of blend all of our colors together too, and just kind of neutralizes a little bit. But now we're going to use again our burnt umber, and we're going to put on our veins on our leaves. And then I'm going to go ahead and show you the next step while I'm at it. Now what I'm using is a liner brush, whatever one you're comfortable with, but they're usually long and narrow bristles up at the end, and we're going to take a little bit of water and bring it out and walk down this area to get it kind of ink consistency. So that's real important, so it's really nice and easy to move around. And then we're just going to follow however is easier for you here. Get my stabilizer here so I don't have to move it around. Everything's falling all over the place. And we're just going to follow those lines. And those should sink right down in those lines that we did earlier. And just put those in. And it's going to really just set those lines off. And it's also going to help put that bright color more towards the background. And just really, really help our leaf. So each individual one of these, wherever we put a line, we want to come and just put our liner. Now if your liner is so thick that you're not getting into those lines, you need to get a smaller liner or add a little bit more water to your brush if you have a smaller one and that's still not working. Okay, so just like that, and see how that's already making that look so much better. But there's one other thing that we're going to do to these. We're just going to add a touch of fall, and what we're going to do is just using our same stuff, we're going to come in here and we're going to just gently lay our brush down. If you were a tool painter, these are called pudmuckles. It's just what is done when you lay it down, and I'm doing mostly in groups of 3s. But it just, again, gives it that real fall feel. And you could do one here and there if you wanted to. But it really is that simple, just setting it down. And again, we're just going to go ahead. Believe it or not, that is the last thing I hope we have to do on these leaves before we add just a couple on the next row, just to kind of bring them all to life here. But you can see if we have the other ones over the top, how hard these would be to do. So that's the reason that we do them now and then put our others on top. And so just simply paint all of the veins, come in and paint the dots on them just to give them that fall feel wherever you think they need to go. The one thing I will try to tell you is try not to have them all in the same area of each leaf. Do them each different. I have finished all of my leaves, and I'm kind of deciding how many big ones, or excuse me, ones that I want to set out. I think I want to set out one here and one here. This I'm going to fill in with acorns, probably 3 acorns there. And I think I'm going to do one here and one here in these areas, and then maybe another one going up here or not. I'm just going to take a look at it. It doesn't have to be that many at all. It's just got to be enough that we've kind of give it that more 3D look. And what I mean is these leaves that stand out. I really think that adds so much more to that. We want that 3D effect. So that's what I am creating with those ones that pop out. So let's get started on those. I'm going to do the exact same way we've been doing, and I've been using this to paint a little bit on, and you can see my stuff is starting to build up here. That's what they tell you about a good artist. Great artists are messy, so I must be really, really good. Wish my husband probably wishes I wasn't so good then. He doesn't complain. He is so good. He says it smells like money. So, alright, we're going to need this. And I'm going to do this a smaller one. I'm not going to do this one really big. I want to try and get a little bit wider, but more standing out than anything. So, and make sure you have all of your other acorn pieces that you need. If there's any of those that you still haven't done, you need to get those done so they can be hardening. And not that we haven't had plenty of time for everything to harden, but okay, so let me find my knife here, dip it in my water. After we get these other leaves on, we're going to start our acorns as well. But it was so much easier to paint those leaves now than later. So let's get all of these edges really smoothed around here. Find my business cards here. Still my favorite clay tool. And I'm going to indent these a little bit. I'm going to really make sure this one is smooth because this one's going to be up a little bit more. So I want to really smooth my edges even a little bit more than we did. And on the gourd part, if you want them smoother, you can push them down a little bit more, however you want to do that. So I am going to kind of see where I want this leaf to go here and where I want him to stand out. Now I will play with him a little bit, but I will let him start to dry and then come back and really reposition him after probably about 15 minutes from when I first started him. I got a hair in here I'm trying to get rid of. It happens to be a dog hair. I don't know why. So we've got that standing up, and I do want to get those parts in. Those are real important to me. You've also got to think about how you're going to get this painted. And I will put an acorn probably right there. So I am happy with that one. So I want to go over here and probably do this one. I think I'll make a little bit longer. I may even kind of bring it across that other one. I can't really tell you yet till I get it there. How's that sound? And I may need a little bit more than what I have. I'm going to take that other piece and work it back in. I'm going to go ahead and create the leaf, and then we'll show you when we put it on. On this leaf, I didn't even cut him. I just kind of came in and pushed him in where I want him to go. I may like doing that on more of your leaves that way instead. So I'm going to kind of bring him into that area there. And again, I just want to kind of set him and see if that's where I like him. If I don't like him there, we can always come in and either make him smaller or move him to another area. So I kind of have played with him on just leaving him just kind of, I think I like it just like that. And I just have kind of let him do what he wanted there. But let's make sure we kind of anchor that. So we've got him standing up. So I am going to do the 2 more right there. And then we'll talk about painting those in the acorns.